Hi, welcome. I'm Anatole, and this is my reaction to Man in the High Castle Season 4, Episode 1, titled Hexagram 64, and it's scored 7.7 on IMDb, but that's after only 190 views, so that's quite low, quite a small sample size. I imagine in a month or so that score will change. If you are joining me for the first time, I'm excited about doing this reaction video. The first show that I did any sort of review or reaction to was Man in High Castle Season 3, and my decision to begin doing reviews on YouTube was based on the fact that I'm a huge Philip K. Dick fan, and I have been thinking about doing some sort of criticism for a long time. My background is as a writer, creative writer, and I long had wondered, would I be able to take my interest in writing and use that in criticism? And so I thought Man in the High Castle would be the perfect place for me to do it because I'm so familiar with Philip K. Dick. I've read a number of collections of interviews about him, a couple biographies, a lot of his writing, novels, some of his nonfiction, including the including the Exegesis, and the later works such as the Valis trilogy. And Man in the High Castle is in my top 5 favorite books of all time. So I thought if I was going to begin anywhere, let's do it with Man in the High Castle. And since that time, it's been just over a year that I've been making these reviews and reaction videos for YouTube. And this is the first program now where I've come back and I'm doing a new season. Everything else I've only done it just the first time. Either I've gone back like I'm doing with Dark, and I started with Season 1 after Season 2 came out, and I've just been doing consecutively everything Dark related, or I just started with a new season making videos for it. But this is the first time now I'm coming back to material that I had already recorded videos for. And I am a bit anxious. I'm excited and anxious at the same time because I had quite a number of problems with Season 3. I think a lot of my problems were related to the showrunner, Eric Overmyer, who took over the show in Season 3. I was quite happy with what Frank Spotnitz did Season 1, and I think that after he left the show in the middle of Season 2, it's remarkable how consistent that season was, and in fact that's my favorite season, Season 2. But there were a number of writing flaws I felt in Season 3 that really dragged it down for me. Contrivance among them. But the world building in this series is just so strong. There are a number of really good character moments that it just carries it along. It papers over the weaknesses. And so I'm really hoping that those problems I have with the contrivance of the plot are not present in Season 4. I've avoided most spoilers. However, as it is with most things these days, it's almost impossible to avoid any sort of spoiler. So there was a thumbnail for the review of the Season 4, I think in The Guardian, that showed an image that kind of spoiled plot development for me, unfortunately. In preparation for this season, in preparation for Season 3, I reread Man in the High Castle. I read a collection of philosophy essays called I think it was Man in the High Castle, I think a philosophy of Man in the High Castle, which was quite useful for me. There was an essay in there regarding the philosopher and historian Hannah Arendt, which lent a whole perspective to the series I was able to utilize in some of my reviews for that season. And I also read the massive 1,000-page book about the history of Germany during World War II, The Rise and the Fall of the Third Reich, which by William, the name just escaped me, but it had always been on my to-read list. So that was some of the preparation I did for Season 3. That was not by any means all the preparation I did. For Season 4, I reread Man in the High Castle again, and because for Season 3 I read a history of Germany in World War II, I'm almost done. Just now I'm at the point where they dropped the bomb on Hiroshima. I'm reading a history of Japan in World War II, titled, I think, The Rising Sun by John Toland. I'm 100% sure that's the name of it. It is, yeah, The Rising Sun by John Toland. I'm listening to that on Audible. I'm 3 hours from the end, and that in itself is a very huge book. Very enjoyable. Highly recommend it. And I'm planning on, after I finish this, going right into a work from Hannah Arendt, because her view on the guilt of the Germans, I thought, was so influential for some of what happened in season 3 that I should read more of her work. I'm going to read, it's her book on totalitarianism called The Origins of Totalitarianism. So I'll probably be reading that concurrent to, I'm guessing, up to about episode 3, my reaction to episode 3. I'm estimating it'll take me that long to read it. I am also now rewatching for the 3rd time season 1, and I'll get into season 2, season 3, and I hopefully will finish season 3 before I finish season 4. But each of those episodes in season 3, as I reviewed them, I watched them 3 times, so I'm quite familiar with that season. And that's my prep for this season. So hopefully you have enough now of my background for this work and the preparation I've done for it. I'm sure you're eager to see my reaction to it. I'm eager to give it. So join me after the intro when I will give you my reaction to Man in the High Castle Season 4, Episode 1, titled Hexagram 64. Did we see this at the end of season 3? I think we did. I think we saw this part, if I'm not mistaken. Either that or it was in the Comic-Con trailer. That's the only bit of spoilery stuff I've watched so far, which was the first Comic-Con trailer. But the final trailer before the season aired, I did not watch. Okay, so this is definitely new. This part. Great sound work. Great sound design. Did you see this? I feel like I've seen this. It must have been in the Comic-Con trailer. So Wesley Strick, Daniel Percival, these are people who have been involved with the show. Now, this is in San Francisco, if I'm not mistaken. I do recognize this from the Comic-Con trailer. It's the Palace of Fine Arts, if it's where I believe it is, which would make sense because the Japanese Pacific states are centered out of San Francisco. Oh, really? I was not expecting that. Okay. So Togami got killed. That's new. The military. Yeah, we see there a difference between the diplomatic and the military response. One thing that the book by John Tolan, The Rising Sun, points out is the difference between the Air Force, between the Navy and the Army in their reaction to World War II, the build-up to World War II. Whoa, questioning the royal family. That's pretty advanced. This is a jump. We did not see this at all in season 3. Happy with about season 3 was the way that the Japan intrigue was really underdeveloped in regards to in comparison to Germany. This gunfire does not look sound very realistic. Who are these people? Why do we care? Do I recognize Wyatt there? Why do we care about these people? I am not a fan of starting with an action sequence with a bunch of guys that you don't even know who they are. Yeah, that's gotta be Wyatt. Wyatt and his crew. Okay, so why do we care about her? We know nothing about her. We've spent no time with her unless she's a character from season 3. You can see the budget. It looks good. The show always has looked good. It's good hearing that Woody Guthrie song. I think the message is quite pointed here. So, Togami fights off this assassin in season 3, only to get knocked off at the end of season 3. Only get knocked off at the beginning of season 4. That's quite convenient for the writers. Interesting. So they kind of foreshadowed this, the conflict between the Army and the Navy in season 3, and that was one of those plot lines they didn't develop. I'm glad they're picking it up here. It looks like they're picking it up here. Tenderloin. If that's supposed to be in San Francisco, that looks nothing at all like the Tenderloin. Oh, so they're there so she can sneak in the weapons to baby carriage. Right there, the distraction. Okay, raise your hand if you saw this coming, right? Here it is.
If I lose as much as a firing pin, you ain't never getting none again.
Why would you say such a thing?
That'll hurt a man. I actually think they're more vulnerable to discovery there than they were with the baby carriage scam. That was a nice little moment. Gotta spare your husband because I'm gonna come back and expect some favors later. Or are you gonna take him out and try to take the place? This is messed up. So all this should have been an arc. Getting to the point where the rebels have been beaten down, this should have been an arc. Instead, we're just taken to the very end before we get a chance to grow with any of these characters other than Wyatt. These actors are doing good work. I've always liked the acting in the series. Yeah, half an hour, half the episode away from Juliana. That's a little unusual.
When you get called. I got a class to teach.
Judo? What subject she's teaching?
Right, everyone, gather around. Let's settle into our horseshoe.
Yep, judo. Oh, children's class. It's kind of cool.
That's not mine.
He's been here. Keto's been here before.
What else is in the drawer?
This is from season 1. This whole thing, this whole plot.
You may go. You are not needed here. Get the suspect.
Is there something to that? She's got a scar above her left eye. So he's sending a message from the other world to her. I'm still not a fan of this killing Tagomi. There it is, The Rise and Fall of the Third Reich. Well, this would be a very good reading list, all these books. Eichmann in Jerusalem, that's from What's-Her-Head, the woman I was going to read a book from, Hannah Arendt. He's got to be someone important in that family to say that and not fear that John would kill him. So I'm guessing it's her brother or his brother, more likely her brother. Is this our first view of Keto at home? I feel like it is. I feel like this is the first time we've gone into the home of Keto. Hank McCrae. Is that Helen McCrae? Helen Smith. Is her maiden name McCrae? So I'm guessing that's Helen's brother. Oh, that was his son. That's interesting. Okay. So not a turncoat, but there because he's the son of Keto. That makes sense.
It is common for new recruits to have trouble at sight of blood.
He was home with the mom, right? At the family when Keto was calling back home? So he's got to be just new to the Pacific Coast states. So they're really going to try to humanize Keto this year. And that's the end of episode 1. So join me in a few seconds and I'll give you my review and thoughts about episode 1. Welcome back, and now for my review on the episode. First, let's begin by talking about the creatives who make the show. As I was recording, I was not sure who the showrunner was, so now that I've finished recording my reaction video, I've watched it for a total of this episode for a total of 3 times, and I've read the forums on Reddit. Unfortunately, the criticism of the show is quite lacking, so I don't have that many resources to draw upon. However, I did watch an interview. I can't remember if it was for this season or season 3. I think it was for season 3. There seems to be very little interviews done for this season. Season 3 had extensive amount of interviews between the executives and the cast. And this one, very little. In fact, actually was an interview. I don't know if it was recorded at Comic-Con, but it was recorded about a couple months ago. They had a handful of the members of the cast, and I believe the executive producer, Issa Dick Howard, and then maybe the director, Daniel Percival. I'm pretty sure that's what it was. Yeah, it may have been an interview with Entertainment Weekly. And so that was helpful. Any research material is going to be helpful and give insight into the reasoning for the decisions they make while making the show. However, I did discover, since recording my reaction, I discovered who the showrunners are. And so for this season, the showrunners are the director, Daniel Percival, who has been a director on the series for, I believe, all 4 seasons, and the writer, David Scarpo, and I was not familiar with him, so I looked up his resume on IMDb, and he was the writer for the movie All the Money in the World, score 6.8 on imdb.com. The remake of The Day the Earth Stood Still scored 5.5 on imdb.com, and then The Last Castle, a score of 7.0 on imdb.com. I have not seen those movies. I do want to see All the Money in the World, but in any event, those scores are not very confidence-inspiring. And you saw the number of problems I had while watching the episode, and they all related to the writing, not so much the acting. I'm not sure how much blame I can put on the direction, because I think most of the flaws come from the writing. So what were my problems? The show is really showing the truncated ending. So they knew before making this season it was going to be their final season, but that doesn't mean that the show was ready to have a final season. Now, I'm glad that Amazon gave them the warning and greenlit a final season so we could get closure, but that just does not mean that the story was ready to end. And I did remark, as I was watching it, it felt like this was a season that needed further development. Where we started episode 1 was a year after the events of episode 10, season 3, but it felt like for us to connect with the characters of the rebellion, we needed further development with them. We only were introduced to them, I believe, in episode 9 of season 3. I couldn't remember the woman, the dead body. I believe she was the ex-love interest of Wyatt, and the one who was a little bit jealous of Juliana, but we never really got to care for her character. So all these people are dying and we just don't care. And it again and again, it felt like there was more story that needed to be told before bringing us to where we were. And if it wasn't told, if it hadn't been assumed to have already happened in this season, the showrunners were forced to make a lot of things happen in order to get the show set up to where they needed it to be. And so that just led to contrivance and weak story decisions. So Wyatt and the rebellion, I mentioned that. It was just a waste of that whole storyline. We were given the two strands of Saba and the underground, the bootleggers that Wyatt was familiar with, and we were given the fake out that we thought that Saba, I believe that's the name, Saba, that group is going to be the rebellion that would lead the resistance. And in the end, it was actually because they had set up their own mini government. So it seemed like that would be the seed of democracy that the show would later follow. But in the end, it was actually the bootleggers. But yet, they're completely wiped out in episode 1 of season 4. So that whole storyline was just a waste of time for us as the viewer. And why do you lead us on only to reverse course? Well, that's because you've had a switch in showrunners. And so these 4 seasons, I think season 3 did remarkably well for bringing in a new showrunner, even though I had problems with that for contrivance and storytelling. But when they made those changes, they seemed to be reaching deep within the source material to do it. The Nazi plot to take over the multiverse came from that unfinished draft that Philip K. Dick wrote for a sequel to Man in the High Castle. So they drew inspiration from the source material in making that decision. And then when Joe made his final turn and used the alias of Joe Cinedella, that was the alias that he used within the book before being killed by Juliana. So again, they drew from the source material. And when Helen went to a psychologist, I just reread the novel before viewing this season. There is talk about being reported to the Nazis for following the dirty Jewish Freudian psychoanalysis. So when they bring that in and instead they draw upon Jungian analysis, that was an interesting twist, an idea that was already in the novel. I don't mind the Black Communist Revolution, but the fact that it's replacing a piece that was already set up, and that is the smugglers becoming the rebellion. It's just a reversal of course that has not been prepared for. The ground was never laid, and it happens too hastily, and it seems pointless now that we already have group set up to be that rebellion. And then my second flaw was about Tagomi. So this, again, this may not be necessarily the fault, not necessarily, it's not the fault of the show that the actor who played Tagomi decided to take up a role within Lost in Space. The fault of the show is how they dealt with the disposal of his character. And instead of making it integral to a plot line within the season, because he was one of the major characters in the show and it deserved for us, the viewers, to be dealt with more gravely, more seriously than just cheaply killed off in the first episode like he was, they could have devised a plot line where people who have jumped between the dimensions find themselves just blinking out of existence. So we could have seen the assistant to Tagomi going to the work one day, going to the office and finding Tagomi's disappeared. Well, what happened this time? He did that before. But in this case, there is no explanation, where then we find that when Juliana meets her sister Trudy in the other dimension, that reunion's cut short because Trudy blinks out of existence. And then here you could introduce a third jumper, a third traveler, and have them blink. And Juliana realizes that her life now is threatened, her whole complete life, just from being blinked out of existence. And that would have created stakes for Juliana, and it would have given a nice, and also, how is she going to bring Trudy back? Because that's one of her main drivers, is always protecting her sister, reuniting that broken family that she lost in episode 1 of season 1. And instead of just cheaply killing off a character that we've spent 3 seasons becoming fond of, and doing it in a way that reverses that assassination attempt on his life in season 3. If you were going to kill off his character, why not just do it in season 3 when you still had the actor and we would have been more invested in his death. And then finally, I like the fact that they're bringing in this more of Kito's personal life, but to do it they pulled the kid trick. And the kid trick is something that was first made aware of to me by Stephen King. I believe he talked about it in his book Danse Macabre, which was his critique and history of the horror genre. But in that novel, in that nonfiction work, he just talks about tropes in general. He discusses things that are used in TV movies, for example, and that's where he talks about the kid trick. And that's when you quickly age a child from a child character from being just very young to being much older. And so the last we knew about Kito's family, his son was quite young and having trouble with bullies at school, if I remember right. And then the show advances in 1 year, and suddenly this young tween, I can only imagine he's a young teenager, if he's small and being bullied, how old is it, 20, 19? He's an adult, more or less. You're not pulling the wool over my eyes on this one. That's just convenience because you want to develop his story, his background. And the only way to do that is to somehow link Tagomi's family with his work. That's the most convenient way you're going to be able to explore his family. But the son's too young, so you're just going to quickly age him up without talking about the fact that you've done that, or even trying to provide a modicum of explanation, like an extra child he didn't know he had. All that sloppy writing left me very unsatisfied. The only scene that resonated for me was when Helen said goodbye to her kids, and it wasn't because of the writing, it was because the actress is so good. So she really brought it. And then the girl who played her older daughter, I could see her really emoting in that scene. So that was the only scene in the entire episode that hit for me. So a disappointing beginning to the season. I'm really hoping that now that we've got these opening moves out of the way, all these things they had to do to get the show to where they wanted it to be, that the writing will be a lot stronger now that they're going to be working from ideas that they want to bring in. But I'm not confident, because a good writer would be able to do those things in an elegant, skillful way, and a bad writer would be very clumsy and not engage us as the viewer. So if you're bad at that, you will be bad at the other things you intend to do. So I'm not confident at all. Okay, well, let me know. What did you think of this episode? Did you have the problems I had? Or what did you enjoy about the episode, if you want to frame it in a positive way? And I hope you'll join me again next time here on my channel when I will review a TV show or a book, or just do a travel video or something. I'll do something. Please join me for that. Yeah, I'm a little worn out after having to say all those negative things for a show I really, really like. Okay, well, until next time, take care and be well. Goodbye.